I wouldn't want to see people getting lazy and thinking that the most important thing is no longer the most important thing. And the most important thing is still the ability to connect with a patient and bring them with you, right? And bring that person along as long as it takes so that person is better, however you define better. And so all these things we're learning, all these books you're reading, all these summaries we're getting from chat, all these beautiful things are great, and they can make a huge difference, and they can make you better and more effective, more efficient and quicker, etc., and make the better make better. But ultimately, if you can't have a conversation and understand inter-AC and have a laugh about it, I think it's still really hard. And I mean, I've seen people in our profession, and I speak to them enough, and I think they're over complicating it, right? What it is, right? And ultimately, I think if you can get someone to smile a bit, if you can meet someone where they are, if it's not about you, then I think you're winning.
Well done. You have finally discovered the most important health podcast you will ever need as a medical professional. The conversations you are about to hear are guaranteed to change your clinical practice and hopefully transform you into a better conversationalist. They could even make you better crack at parties. Welcome to Teacup, where swearing is guaranteed.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Teacup. Before we get into the episode, I just wanted to let people know what's going on with my course, Unraveling S&C for Therapists. I work with companies called HDPN, Encore, and Training Made Easy, which all have available dates on their sites. Or you can go to my bio on Instagram, which is at ProCareSports for all available course dates. If anyone is interested in hosting a course, please email me on info@procaresportsmedicine.com. Again, you can DM me on Instagram if you prefer. The course itself is designed for any level of therapist looking to improve their coaching skills alongside building patient commitment into their rehab programs, intertwining S&C principles as we go along. Finally, I'm also the co-founder of the Unbound project, and this is a really new, exciting project looking to build a community for healthcare professionals to connect, collaborate, and share ideas. This includes webinars and in-person face-to-face events, and more information is available at Unbound Project on Instagram or LinkedIn, or if you email us on hello@unbound-project.com for more details. David, the Wild Horse Clancy, is in the house.
You started with that one, did you? Wow.
I was actually supposed to look up the Italian for it as well. You know, even better. It probably sounds well good in Italian. Do you know what it is?
I should know. It probably sounds beautiful. I probably did know.
Yeah, you should get it as a tattoo as well. That definitely would be good. If people obviously don't know what we're talking about, that's all right, because you do a great interview, which is a lot more into like where you began and how you began, and we'll dive into some of those bits, but we're going to dissect the communication side of things today. But if anyone's interested in you, Dave, because you're very, very interesting past and how you've got to where you've got to. So Andy Thomas's life stories, if you type David Clancy in there, you'll be able to check out all about that. But I'm going to get straight into quick fires with you, Dave, just so that everyone gets to know who you really are. So you have to, if you've never heard the podcast before, which I'm sure you've listened to all of them, you don't have to answer right now. I'm going to give you 10, one or the other, and you just have to say one. Now, okay. A lot of people struggle with it. Some people kind of go off on it, but I'll try and stick to one or the other. All right. Okay. So we'll start with Jordan or Magic.
Jordan.
Soccer or GAA? GAA for people who thought I said something different there.
Well, hurling, but if you're going GAA, it would be soccer. Yeah.
So if I said to you that I've got to go with this one then. So if I said to you hurling soccer, what would you do? What would you pick?
Hurling.
Oh, you're such a Limerick man.
Hurling. Yeah, hurling.
Hurling. All right, he's going with it. Comedy club or theatre?
Theatre.
City break or beach?
City break.
Therapist or coach?
Coach.
Communication or exercise?
Both. Communication.
Ah.
Communication. Communication.
AC or inter?
AC.
Nice. Swearing or not swearing?
Swearing.
Keen or Cantona?
Oh. Cantona.
Shorts or trousers?
Shorts.
Even in the winter?
Yeah, no problem.
Oh, you're minging. You're
All
absolutely
day,
minging it,
no problem.
We have to end the podcast now. And then my last one before we get stuck into some serious questions is, well, this is a serious question. I ask it all the time and sometimes I forget till the end. But for you, if you were to use, if you were to pick any kind of music, a song or genre to describe you as a person or as you as a therapist, I don't mind which way you go with it, but what would you say about yourself?
Thunderstruck AC/DC. There you go. Intensity.
I love it. Short form answers. Love it. It's kind of like intensity. I was like, that's it. Fucking straight to the point. I like it. Right. So let's get into some questions I'm really interested in talk to you about. Because again, when people have gone, if they've listened to the one with Andy, you're obviously from Limerick, but you spent time in Italy. You spent time in, obviously now you live in Dublin. You've been in London a lot, and in the US because of your, is it NBA or NFL or both?
Bit of both. And,
Yeah.
you know, I've also lived in Canada as a kid.
Oh,
and
that's right, yeah.
And I've lived in New Zealand. So I've, you know.
Parlez-vous français?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. Yeah.
That's it from me.
Montreal, a long time ago, 95.
So with all that in mind, what's the could you kind of go through I'm looking at kind of the pros and cons to that experience. Not everyone's going to have gone through that, and I think everyone always talks about the pros of that, which I'm interested in, obviously. But what are the potential cons of that when it comes to your communication style? So go whichever way it feels comfortable for you. But how would that help? Or, you know, even sometimes people forgetting that they may have gone to these countries and how that could be useful, or actually dealing with different cultures and what that brings to you as maybe a therapist, or be able to communicate better as a therapist.
For me, it'd be so hard to think of a con, Andrew. Like, it's only loaded with pro, to be honest, because
Sure.
I think spending 4 years in Montreal as a kid had a huge impact on me, our family, my career, my kind of curiosity and things like that. And I think people that have an opportunity to travel, be that study or work or just go away a little bit, the exposure can give you so much, from a ability to connect with different people, to be empathetic to other people who don't speak the same language as you, to understand other worldviews and different perspectives. And I mean, a huge part of my life now involves speaking with people who are outside of Ireland, right? And I love that. I love really trying to get to understand what's it about where they are, and why is it important for them, and where do they live. So, I mean, there's no doubt there's a lot of nuance to when you're speaking with different people, right? When you're speaking to an American, it's probably a very different conversation to if you're speaking to someone who's Spanish or French or Italian, or an Australian is very different to a Kiwi. And I think there's, when you have those different conversations, you maybe think about how you articulate your thoughts, and kind of, you know, the sense of humor, and how casual you go, or how formal you go, or how fast or how slow. I think it's a huge thing. And I mean, in London, we had such a diverse mix of patients coming in through the door, right? Because of the nature of it being in London. And I think, you know, that exposure to travel early would have probably helped me connect with different patients. Not everyone, but definitely more understanding of, oh, this person's coming from the south of France, and at least you know where the south of France is, and at least you know the city they might talk about. And I think that gives you a huge leverage point for connection, right? Because you can understand a little bit more as to where they've come from.
I tell you what I want to say to you now after that is, like, I totally understand why it's only a pro. I suppose what I meant by the con was, and I guess people listening who maybe want to expose themselves to this, is the con is it's really difficult. Like when you've been, your experience in Italy was something else. Like going over there,
Yes.
no idea of the language,
Very hard.
very hard. Now that's what I'm kind of interested in. How does somebody who, might be shy and might be uncomfortable and would benefit a lot from everything you're saying, but has that barrier or that, whatever people call it, imposter syndrome, or worried that they're going to look silly and all that. Have you any, from your experience, and I know everyone's different, but what do you think people could use to get them through those maybe first 6 weeks of difficulty? Or what did you do maybe? What were the small things that you did that might have just took the edge off the pain of not really understanding or knowing,
Yeah, well, let's talk about Italy, right? So,
Yeah.
Going there for a week and then coming back and then knowing I'm going there for 4 months, right? And 4 months to a country I didn't know that well, to a language I didn't have at all, to then have to interact with patients and colleagues in a language I did not have, and was really hard, right? Super hard. And I think what I would say to your question to that, Andrew, is it's a great question. I often kept on thinking about, where is this bringing me to? This is part of where I'm trying to go. And not overthinking it then, but that was a huge part. So I knew that after this period of time, I'd be where I wanted to go, and this was part of it. So I just leaned into that. And I mean, I remember going over to Italy knowing I had no Italian, and this was before Duolingo was popular, right? And I was spending time with my uncle in Limerick. I would go to my uncle, who speaks many languages, Jerry, my dad's brother, and he would help me with Italian. And I'd be listening to it in a car. And all jokes aside, we spoke about Intern AC. I'd be watching Serie A matches, trying to connect with the culture of football in Italy, knowing I'd be seeing footballers. And so I really tried to at least front load as much as I could what it might be like culturally, and even looking at a map and kind of going, okay, there is a difference between the north and the south. And when someone says they're from Napoli, it's very different to if someone's from Milan or Bergamo. So at least I tried to give myself a little bit of that, because when I was over there, and you're speaking, you're listening in Italian, not having a clue what they say, and someone says Inter Nerazzurri, and someone says Rossoneri, red and black, and you're kind of going, oh, actually, this is a big deal. Actually, this is a big thing. Like, this is the divide of the city. So I think, like anything, if you can prepare a little bit, that will offset off the anxiety and the uncertainty and the questions you might have. So I did quite a lot of that, so that at least when I was going over, not even knowing where I was living, not even knowing what a workday could look like, not even knowing if I would do well in an exam in Italian, that at least I had done some things I could control from afar. And so I tried to give myself a head start, knowing it was a steep mountain,
I like that culture bit. You don't even have to, yeah, I think that's a really good answer with regards to, it's like any habit, isn't it? Or anything you're trying to get into, it needs to be easy and it needs to be somewhat fun or enjoyable. And most people, the Italian culture, well, I'm biased, I like it, but it's interesting you went by that way. So because you can see so much. It's more than just the language, isn't it? It's the feeling of it. It's
the food, it's the music,
yeah.
It's the sport, it's the big difference between the north and the south. Like,
it's massive, isn't it? Yeah.
If someone's from Puglia or someone's from Calabria or someone's from one of the islands, like, knowing that Sicily, we've watched The Godfather, but it's really different. So even when I was in Italy, I was working really hard, crazy long hours, because that was what it took. Anytime I had an opportunity to go, I traveled. with my girlfriend at the time, or with my parents, or with a friend, and I would, get a train and go to Firenze, to Florence, or I would go to Verona, or I would go to Brescia, or I would go to different parts of Tuscany just to see it and kind of feel it. And I think that was, that 4-month period, as much of it was, like language, it was all about the culture, right? It was all about trying to understand Italy and an Italian person, because in the clinic, they were all Italian. It wasn't like London, where you had Italians and you had French and you had English and you had Irish and you had Indians and you had Japanese. In Italy, they were nearly all Italian. So if I didn't have a clue, I was already off to a -1.
And just to link it back to because when I worked in London, and then I worked in East London, and so it was really heavily Bengali population. So we would have loads of interpreters. So every day was a communication challenge. You know what I mean? We had all this stuff, and then you'd have to try and communicate via somebody else and try and get empathy and different culture. It was extremely difficult, especially as a new physio as well. And then I moved to Cornwall, after 6 or 7 years of that. And I remember I remember my first patient. I used to actually remember her name right up until a few years ago, but I remember what she was knee arthritis or something like that. And I remember going, oh my God, it was like someone had given me communication steroids because I was asking questions and it was coming back like she would answer them quite, I didn't have to go through a second person. And then I was able to kind of, I don't know if this is my question to you. I don't know. I've never said this to anyone, but I kind of felt like I came out and went, not that I didn't think it was piss easy. I just kind of went, oh my God. I knew everything she said. I got through so much in half an hour. She was smiling. I was laughing at the end. Not that I didn't enjoy my book, but it's so difficult when you have no idea what somebody's saying, or when you think the interpreter may have not said exactly what you said, and you're all that second guessing. So do you feel now, and even now with all that experience, and again, just to help people maybe listening to get that, do you sometimes feel that that's beneficial even now talking to Irish people or working in Dublin and stuff like that?
Yeah, because when I think about that period and even the link I would have to Italy for that period, you can communicate in a lot of ways without words, right? And you learn it when you don't have the words, right? You learn the other ways of the stuff we're taught in college, right? But you don't really get it. Yeah. So it's like actually watch someone walk in and actually look and actually observe that and actually look at how they're holding themselves and look at their posture and actually all those nonverbals. And when they're speaking, what's their tone like? And is there pain in their voice? Or how loud or quiet are they? So I think you can pick up on all those subtleties that nearly tell you the full story before you even go, come va oggi? Va bene? So before you even get to that bit, you already have so much information. And I think that's a huge thing. So even now, I did a session last week with a company. And I mean, the first thing I did was I walked into the room and I tried to read energy, body language, looking at people, how are they communicate? Were they closed off? Were they open? Were they using their hands or not? And that already gave me a sense as to, I'm going to try something here. I'm going to start with something that I wasn't going to do, that's lighter, more off the cuff, because I see that sort of energy and manifestation of a communication in the room. And I probably got a lot of that from Italy.
That's cool. Yeah, I know. I understand, because a lot of that stuff you just said there as well, and I get that. It's not written down like that's what you do. There's no. You have to kind of, like you said, you had one of your senses taken away. It's like you took her ears away, effectively.
Yeah.
Okay, you can still. I know you mentioned about sound and loud and quiet, but effectively, yeah, you took out one massive degree of communication that we have, and it was extremely difficult, but yet these skills develop in this kind of, I wouldn't say dark period, because it wasn't dark, but it's difficult, super difficult when you don't know what someone is saying, I think. And the fact that you're already pushed into a corner, you then have to really open up, you know what I mean? And I think if you're what's the word? If you've got too much of it already, you don't pick that up. You don't pick those subtleties up,
I think too, another big thing is you're forced to keep it simple.
Yeah.
Right? So if you only have 10 words or 20 words, but
Yeah.
they still might be the right words. So you know what the words are like. So I would remember dolore. So I would say with intonation, I would say like, do you have pain? So I'd be putting the question mark by knowing only I had the word, but it was enough because they'd come back with, molto, molto dolore, and they'd point to where, and then I go, this person's struggling, they've got a lot of pain today. So that whole thing about having to use loads of words or minimal words, and you don't need to sound smart, you don't need a lot of jargon to ultimately make a difference. So when I think back to that, even now, having not thought about it a lot, I think that's a big thing as well, right? So I mean, we all know what a patient wants, right? If it's a patient, they probably want to get out of pain, they want to move better, they want to get back to where they were or slightly better. It's not that complicated, but sometimes we overcomplicate it. So I think even that sense of keeping it tight and short can actually
Yeah.
help, you
Yeah.
know?
You say that now, it's kind of brought into my head. Two Portuguese patients in the last few weeks. As again, you wouldn't get many. I live southwest of England, very single culture really. But there's a couple of Portuguese guys came in, and they had very good English, but exactly what you just said there. I go into a mode where it's like only necessary questions, and I think about the question and be clear about it. Whereas I probably over talk when you've got somebody who speaks English first language, and you just probably vomit a lot more than you probably need to. Sometimes it might be the right thing, but for somebody who vomits a lot, it's. I think sometimes I enjoy the difficulty of having to keep it really clear. And then I've just noticed myself, I get very, it's weird, it's because Italians are like as well, they're very handsy.
Yeah.
And I get like that when I'm talking to somebody in a different language. You start to describe it with your hands, don't you? You start
Yeah.
doing all these kind of things, which you wouldn't do with elsewhere. But it's actually a really good way of dealing with it, like, because your empathy comes out in
Yeah.
that sense.
And I think you end up, I would think about this a lot with different languages. You mightn't have many words, but as we've heard a million times, not for everyone, but if you use a couple, surely to God it helps with connection. So, I mean, if you have no French, but you can still say, ça va bien, if you can say anything like that, you're even smiling, that's what happens, right? Straight away they go, they made the effort. And
Yeah.
so like it's human nature, and I think it's a huge thing. And then of course Italy or wherever, the next question is always like calcio, it's football, right?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah. Yeah.
and then you're off, then it's the next hour is not that hard, right? It's kind of the stuff you probably know what you're doing. But I think those initial periods you can give yourself a leg up by a couple of different things like that. Yeah.
Just going to move slightly away from that a little bit. But like obviously you set up a bunch of different things, including your own business back in Dublin. Isn't it Aurora? Is that how do
Yeah.
you is that
Hawara, yeah.
Aurora?
Hawara.
Yeah, yeah. What does that mean again?
Comes from a school system in New Zealand of kind of whole person well-being, foundations of a house. That's originally where it comes from. So
Oh,
having
cool.
a strong foundation, walls. Hence why when we founded Hawar, it was based on the premise of whole person well-being.
Yeah.
And that came from coming back going, there's more to treatment than just physical, even mental. There's other elements. So let's look at the whole person. And I learned it when I was in New Zealand. That I always liked that kind of thought.
And that kind of basically nicely summarizes what we just said about you learning you learning to do physiotherapy in a country that had no language. You were having to do the everything else and still
Yeah.
get by those 4 months and communicate, which is quite nice. That'll bring it back to that as well. But so when you're coming back and you're setting up, because you're in London and stuff, but setting up a business, I've done it. You do it. I took loads of things away from it when it came to being a better therapist. Do you have any kind of similar findings when it came to you as a therapist and your communication style when you had to set up a business and what you learned?
Again, it's hard. There's a lot of learning to it, even setting up a business, knowing what's involved in setting up a business, right? And kind of the paperwork. And I mean, I was part of a sports medicine clinic when I came straight back from London called SoCo. A sports med didn't last that long. I kind of bought in, and after 18 months, it wasn't going so well. Hora, I mean, that was a real deep dive into a different world, right? So that was, I mean, for people that might be a little bit separated from, say, a traditional clinic. But I think if you're wanting to open up a clinic, I would say, it's there's a steep learning curve. I think if you have the opportunity to speak to people that have done it, that helps an awful lot. You can ask the questions as to what are the pitfalls, or what are the things I need to keep an eye for, or to really give yourself an upper hand. Because I mean, to pay for my master's back in the day before Italy, I had a private practice out of a gym.
Yeah.
And I mean, the hardest, like, as we've all had, right? It was called Clancy Clinic. True story, out of a total fitness gym. But the hardest thing with that was getting clients in the door, right? So selling and marketing and understanding what goes on a poster. And it wasn't treating of patients. It wasn't needling. It wasn't assessing a shoulder. It was actually making sure you had enough people coming in to pay rent. So I think.
Sorry, do you mind? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. The only reason I'm saying this because I heard you say this, and that's what made me think of asking you the question. So I want to dive in a little bit more because I want to think that we both kind of struggled. Where did you get your help? And do you think there's two questions really. Where did you get your help? Where did you think? What did you do there? Like you talked about your uncle and stuff like that, when he was like learning the language. But where were your go-tos? And then I've kind of forgotten the other question, but I'll come back to it. Like the other thing is to help people speed that section up, because I was in the same, I had to learn marketing, psychology, branding, website stuff, accountancy, which again, I think it's all really useful to go through all those things, but there could be definitely a more efficient way, or is certainly a way that people could say, look, I tell you what, if you go and see these guys, they really look after, that's a really good place to start. Whereas I was like getting whatever I could, which, took a long time. Do you know what I mean? And I was just wondering, but if we go back to the first one, was there anything that you did, what were the things that you did to try and get you through those early days?
Like the first one, which was my first deep dive into, say, entrepreneurial world back in the day, Clancy Clinic, my other uncle, funnily enough.
Such an Irish story.
Such an Irish story. He helped me because he helped me understand what a business card needed to look like. He helped me understand what a website needed to look like. He helped me understand actually how you engage someone walking in the door and get them that the dance between, are you selling or are you adding value? Like all that. If we go to, say, Hora, which was quite a period of time later, a few years ago, and I probably brought it into my other ones now. I mean, really, to be honest, with Hora, we spent a little bit of money on helping someone with brand, helping someone understand our positioning in the market, that then helped inform what we would write on a website on Squarespace. That would help us understand who our target market was. So I spent a little bit on that, trying to help me find clarity and think about those things. But I would say, Andrew, I think there is a bit of hard work. I think there is a bit of time. I think you can shortcut it, yeah. But I would model, I would steal like an artist, I would look at other clinics that seem to have a good thing going and ask the question why you think it's a good thing going, and try to, that's what they put on their website, or that's how they market themselves, or that's how they speak to the public. And I mean, I did a lot of that with Hora, and then just put ourselves out there,
Yeah, it's interesting you say this, because this is most the journey, and I get the struggle is part of it. We just talked about the communication side as well. It's the reason why, like, I don't know, have you, like me and Andy Hosgood and Andy Thomas have set up Unbound project just for this particular, just like what you said. And it's not about getting people like quicker. There's still a struggle with anything, but it's just like you said there, like looking at other websites and but it's kind of like just even having those conversations and those worries and concerns, like if you're going to drop $5,000 on branding, as a therapist to start with, you're thinking, what's that going to get me? And you get so many people selling you the story, or like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And actually, you could be $5,000 in the hole and no further on. And, that's the kind, I think some therapists may get caught in that trap of right, am I going to get done here? Or they get burnt early with something, and then a couple of grand is a couple of grand, especially if you're starting on your own.
Yeah.
And I think we need to do better as healthcare professionals, especially developing good supportive communities, around this kind of stuff, because ultimately there's plenty of patients. And the better the quality of physio, the better the quality of the name, in our opinion as well. And I'm sure you share the same thing. And I just think, what's your opinions on, I suppose, the world of healthcare? Do you have any kind of like observations of the way things work, or would you change it? Like, I had a question there maybe around conferences, even like anything that you think that we do now that you would change if you could.
I'm part of a group in the States that do, we have these kind of leadership conversations every 3 to 4 weeks, right? As you hear, we've all do these, but this fellow called Ed Milet said something a couple of weeks ago, and it really struck a chord, because I see it, I feel it, and hence why I do a lot of the work I do. Is it's all about connection for me, right? And you're nodding there, and like relationships, connection, building intercommunication, understanding other people, and all of that is what it's all about for me. So I think if people don't get that, or don't really understand that, even with AI and with all those tools, and believe me, I'm studying them all, a lot of it will still, the ability to connect with a human is massively important. And I think in healthcare, broad strokes, I hate to say it, but I wouldn't want to see people getting lazy and thinking that the most important thing is no longer the most important thing. And the most important thing is still the ability to connect with a patient and bring them with you, right? And bring that person along as long as it takes, so that person is better, however you define better. And so all these things we're learning, all these books you're reading, all these summaries we're getting from chat, all these beautiful things are great, and they can make a huge difference, and they can make you better and more effective, more efficient and quicker, etc., and make the better make better. But ultimately, if you can't have a conversation and understand inter-AC and have a laugh about it, I think it's still really hard. And I mean, I've seen people in our profession, and I speak to them enough, and I think they're over complicating it, right? What it is, right? And ultimately,
Yeah.
I think if you can get someone to smile a bit, if you can meet someone where they are, if it's not about you, then I think you're winning. So for me, like that's an innovation. As much as people think it's not, it absolutely is. So what are we taught from day one? I think we need to still remember that. So yeah, that's a huge thing. There's so much information out there. It's also understanding what's the right information to look at, what to say no to. There's so much to that.
Yeah, interesting when you were just saying all that, making a couple of notes. And I think it's important to highlight that. I think the tech stuff and the AI stuff should be getting rid of all the shit that we do not need to do
Correct.
better, faster, so that we have what you just said, which is the connection phase, the thing that makes humans and humans, and that they come into a room for an hour or a half an hour with another human, and the noise is being removed. That you're there to facilitate removal of noise. Now, that noise may be a social thing for them, or a mental health problem, or just their knee pain because it's stopping them going to the gym. So you're there. Your main job is, like you just said, is to build that connection, that trust, to get them where they want to be. And in that half an hour, you want all your energy on that. And that if your notes and that your marketing and branding can be done in a quicker way, and it's done by a robot that can help you, guide you, and you don't have to spend 2 hours writing copy, then that's what it's useful for. But it's just getting that. We have an opportunity, I think. I don't know what you think, but as therapists, we have an opportunity now to go, we're wanted more than ever in a world of absolute noise,
I think there's a lot of mechanisms, processes, the before, the after, that can all be taken care of. And to your point, call it admin, call it ops, call it whatever you want to call it, right? But having the white space, the space to create an energy, to change an energy, to connect at the right deep sort of level, to be creative, to actually listen, to actually understand, because ultimately a lot of it probably that's what it nearly is all about, then I think you're okay. So I mean, yeah, back in the day, physio tools and all those sort of things, right? We can get a lot of help now. And for sure, if you're trying to understand are you doing the right thing in terms of treatment or diagnostics, lean into AI, ask the questions, ask good questions and prompt it right and go on a course. But I think, like, don't lose your ability to think and don't become lazy, and also understand, like, I'd say to people, listen to podcasts like this that get people to think about communication, because it's a skill to train, and if you don't train it and really deliberately think about it, you're we all think we're better at it than we are, right? So we can all get way better at it. Myself
Yeah,
included. 1,000%.
yeah, it's continuous, isn't it? Like Ben Cormack is on my second podcast.
Yeah.
It was saying, like, you just, when you become conscious of how shit you are at it,
Yeah.
or how shit everyone else is at it, but it's just a continuous process. Speaking of which, actually just jumped in my head, and you probably have a lot of experience dealing with, like, especially pro athletes and stuff. And there's a couple of things I want to go into with that. And it's just that I remember saying to some therapists as well, it's like, as someone who played football and I know you played basketball at a high level and stuff, and athletes are unbelievable at knowing whether you're a clown or not, or whether you're taking the piss. They're some of the best people to know whether you come in a room, and so you can have all the gadgets and all the kind of jazz, but they're absolute experts in going, you don't get this situation. I don't know if you agree with that, but they're like, within seconds you'll know that they're like, nah, this isn't for me. I mean, what do you think of that? Like, especially because you deal with, like, that kind of world. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, 1,000%. They'll sniff it out in a minute. And how do they? Who knows?
Yeah,
Because
right.
neither of us are Super Bowl
Winners.
caliber players or all stars
Yeah.
in the NBA court. I think what comes to mind on that is, say if you're trying to win a conversation like that and nurture trust in a conversation like that, to at least give yourself a chance that they might buy in. I spoke about it last week, and, like, you'll know this, Andrew, but maybe not everyone. I often talk about the trust equation a lot, like the trust quotient. So, credibility plus reliability or consistency plus intimacy or vulnerability over self-orientation, right? Trusted Advisor, it's a great book, a fellow called Meister. But imagine if you can score yourself fives on the top: credibility, reliability, intimacy. And if you're selfish or selfless at the bottom, that's the denominator, which can make you be really high in trust or low in trust. And I think I thought about that before when I heard it, like years ago. Like, I read it a long time ago. I read it several times, and I thought about it a lot with pros in particular. And sometimes to this day, I will think about it. Like last week, when I was trying to nurture, say, an exec group, what do you lean into? Where do you lean into, and what are you trying? What's your leverage point if you're like, this guy ain't gonna believe a word I'm saying, I need to impress them, and it's all about credibility, like, or what's the dance between how you can get someone to go, I'm bought in, I believe everything Andrew's saying. And so I think it's something for us to think about as a profession and broad across healthcare, because I mean, I can think of countless times when I thought I'd lost a patient early, and I'm like, what have I done wrong here? Like, why is that patient not even engaging? And what is it? And I haven't leaned into enough science, not enough rigor here, not given them enough of the rationale and the why behind why we're doing this. Or it was purely about connecting with the human and the person, and it was vulnerability early because I could spot that there was an issue. And then straight away it's like, oh, there's a high level of trust. They see me as an expert. So I think if you're dealing with a pro athlete, like, they probably have their antenna up for all of those kind of things, and kind of go, does this person belong here? Is this person good enough? Does she really know her stuff? Does she know this game?
let me ask you then. There's two words that have come into mind, and I can hopefully make sense with this. I think there's two things that just jumped out from your conversation that I'm always a big fan of, and it doesn't matter whether you're with an elite athlete or whoever, Mary with an OA&E or John with an OA&E, right? Is the transparency and empathy.
Yeah.
Both, like whether you're playing in the fucking NFL or whether you want to hold your grandkids or walk to the shop, they're both really fucking important to that person. And one is not more important than the other.
Correct.
Society will say that winning the NFL is a very glorious thing, etc., etc. But really, at the end of the day, as Johnny Wiggleton said, it's just a goal. It's just one thing. And the goal of walking down the road shouldn't be held in any higher esteem than if winning the NFL, if both people want that goal and both people find joy from it.
Yeah.
So if there's that kind of empathy with the person's problem, that you can understand that, or even from a minute understand, which is obviously to try and be empathic with somebody trying to win an NFL, is difficult when you're not there. But likewise, I'm not 75 years old and can't walk down the road either. So there's the ability for the therapist to be able to get in those empathic spaces. It's the same problem. It's the same problem.
Yeah.
And again, I think also just to flip that, and I'd like your points on that as well, is transparency between both. So just being transparent and honest about what you do know and about the situation. So sometimes I'll come to the very end and just be very like, we don't have a name for this.
Yeah.
You know, I could, if I call it osteoarthritis, that's going to mean something to you that may be really negative.
Yeah.
And I can't really say it's that as such. So I'm just going to call it, you got a pissed off knee.
Yeah.
And people can often go, oh, that's cool. That's all right. We'll go with that. I don't know. But it just came to me when you were saying about like, what do athletes think? I think it's on the same basis of what anyone else would think. They're just concerned about where they want to get to. I don't know what you think of that.
Yeah, it's what they care about, right? You're there to get them to where they want to be, right? So I think if we can remove our ego and actually go, this isn't about a task now. I need to orientate myself to this as a person in front of me who has a clear objective, and really trying to understand and listen and not interrupt. And yeah, I think it's a huge thing. It sounds so easy to have empathy, but like it's the biggest thing, isn't it? It's the biggest thing,
Yeah, and that's what, like we said about communication. I think I always ask on the course I run, I'm always like, can you do you practice empathy? Like where do you get it from? Like I put up different pictures as examples, and one of them is my mum who passed away. And I was like, well, what's like, if someone mentions grief to me, in the past, I probably wouldn't have understood it or maybe given it enough in the communication, right? And since my mum died, as part of like, I suppose it's therapy for myself, is that I kind of go, well, that was fucking awful for me.
Yeah.
This is awful for them. Yeah. And is it something I need to explore as part of their whole ecosystem, that and why they may be here with their knee pain? And that's what I mean by practicing empathy, is the fact that you do need to kind of lean in, because you can be tired, you can be worn out, patients can be irritating. Do you know what I mean? And it's just trying to switch that part of your brain off in a way is a skill, just like anything else. And I wonder, do people really think enough about that? I don't know what you think about that.
No, and I mean, you've mentioned something. I think obviously if people have life experiences that are close to their head, heart, legs, then it becomes easier to live it and breathe it and actually understand and live that through. And I mean, people that know me know I talk about it enough, right? That I've got 2 kids. I have one daughter who's got a lot of challenges. She's definitely dialed up my empathy, right? And it's a funny thing when I think about it, right? Because 8 years ago, I'd like to think when I was practicing, I was really empathetic. I'd probably be better now. So I'd probably be more empathetic now, because I think of different people different, and I look at people different, and I'm actually way less judgmental than I used to be. Like the whole, be curious, not judgmental from Ted Lasso. Like, wow, like what a line was, because now if my son made a comment today in the National Aquatic Centre in Dublin, right? There was a kid getting changed, and my little man, who I think has high empathy because he's got a sister with, special needs. So I think, God, he's got a chance. He's going to be a beautiful human being. And he made a comment, and I went, Michael, why did you say that? You weren't really kind there. Think about what you said. He didn't say it to the kid. The kid didn't hear him, but I
Yeah.
heard what he said, and I was like, Michael, and I heard like lack of empathy, not enough consideration of someone else.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's something, and that's on my radar now because of my world. So I think if people haven't gone through what you have, I haven't. I can't imagine, but my wife has, right? So I have some sense. So I think if people have some sense of different things that people can face, of course, you're going to understand empathy probably a little bit more.
And it's popped into my head when you started talking about that good example of the 8 years and what would be the difference. And I don't think, well, maybe we do. Maybe I'm just saying, no, I'm sure people have thought this and have said this maybe. But it made me think we don't get better at it. Like, people sometimes observe me assessing a knee, and the therapist who comes and said, oh, like they brought the patient, they're going, I'm really struggling with this patient. And I would say 9 times out of 10, it's never to do with the diagnosis or the physical problem or what was wrong with the knee. The knee was the knee. But 9 times out of 10, the breakdown is the communication was completely different. So I got more information out of the patient, and we went down a different road. Same treatment nearly, but everything was dressed in a different situation to what the original physio had done. And they look at going, oh, you asked that question, you asked that question. So it's just made me think we don't get better with assessment skills. We might have pattern recognition, but I don't know if there's a ceiling to the pattern recognition for a certain amount of pathology that we see. There's going to only be a certain amount. You get the odd kind of, obviously, hen's teeth here and there, but generally there's a lot of common stuff. And I think we just get better at empathy and that communication side and reading people and asking better questions quicker. Just from
Yeah.
what you were saying there,
Yeah, and like when I was given 7 Habits, Covey, by Phil Batty in London, right? And he schooled me up on inconsistency as a clinician. He's like, David, you let yourself down if you're not consistent. And I remember he said to me, like, seek first to understand, right? And I remember it. So I think it's like, when I think too of patients' treatments that went well in Eyes Kinetic, there's this philosophy called the maximal functional recovery possible, right?
Yeah.
And what's involved in that is lots of cross-discipline expertise and communication. So if a patient who blows out their knee, what ACL, MCL, the whole thing after a skiing incident, it's a long process. Communication is absolutely vital from, diagnostic, yes, pre-op, all the way through. And if it's not the same, or if it's drastically off at some point, there's usually a pinch point or a pain, or there's an issue, or there's a breakdown. So a huge part of the recoveries that went well was because somebody said something, the other person said something similar. And we all kind of knew what we were doing, and everyone was on the same page. There was no significant breakdown. It was kind of clear where we were going. Everyone was speaking the same language. And usually those sort of rehabs went really, really well. And the patient was really happy and enthusiastic at the end.
I think that's great as well, because it's the same. The problems we see in the NHS, I do half and half, private, half NHS, and half the problems in my first 15 minutes sometimes are breaking down the miscommunication of, I've been told different things. Just like you just said. Yeah, they're just like, well, I've been told this, I've been told that. And no wonder people are like completely just like, so most of the time it's just like, okay, my job here is to make it as clear as possible. So you leave the room in half an hour feeling a lot more in control. And you can see them going, that's exactly what I want, and then you listen to their concerns. And most of the concerns are stuff that people don't, simple things, you know what I mean? And I read a really good paper there recently about, I think it was one of Sullivan's paper, Peter Sullivan's group. Can't remember, Cowell maybe, 25, something like that. Recent one about reassurance. So they transcribed a bunch of appointments, and they looked and broke it down. And it was just interesting reading the transcripts. And, it's always easy as a physio looking at over someone's shoulder and reading what they said and thinking, oh, I wouldn't have said that. I would have said something else. But you don't know really. I don't think. I think you'd be egotistical to think otherwise. And you can see why the therapist goes down this path of reassurance. But when you read deeper into it, the patient's not asking about MRIs or scans, yet the physio continuously reassures about scans and X-ray, but the patient's not worried about it. They even say, I'm not too bothered about the scan.
Yeah.
And then the physio goes, but the scan is fine. And they go again. And I was like, wow, you know what I mean? They're just not listening. No, they're not listening. And then again, it's quite interesting because, again, what was really good about the paper is it took away that the therapist probably goes on courses, educating themselves and going, look, you now know that you can say these things, that pathology is not always, bad on an MRI. And so they get all of that in their head and think, right, patients want to hear this. But they've actually just missed the whole point,
Yeah, and you've made me think of two things there. Like 1,000%, if anyone, like, we've all hurt ourselves. What do we want? We want clarity, and we want someone to actually be curious about us and to understand what's going on and help us fix that. So, like, I always think, I just wrote as you were speaking, clarity wins, right? Just be clear, and like, I don't care about the image. I care about the MR. Like, and the other thing too, I think a huge thing of Benoy, therapeutic alliance, building a relationship is, and I'm going to borrow it from a book called The Coaching Habits, like staying curious that little bit longer. Like, we've heard this a million times, Andrew, and I've said it before, but we always want to interrupt and prove how smart we are, right? But really, ask good questions and shut up, and you'll be told more often what's going on. So I think anyone relatively less experienced listening, like, that's a superpower. Like, even if you're out of school, like, I'm lecturing tomorrow in UCD, right? I'm lecturing final year physio students from Nickel Van Dyke, who put me forward for it. And one of the big messages...
Is that hamstring, Nordic hamstring curl, Nickel Van Dyke? Did he do a bunch of
You'd
research?
like to think he's way more than hamstrings.
yeah. Just make sure he listens to this.
Aspetar BJSM.
Yeah, that's
Nickel. Nickel,
Nickel,
you're a doc connector. You're way more than hammies, my friend.
Just hammies. That's all I know you for.
But all jokes aside, yeah. So fair play, Nickel. You got me into UCD again. But I have a slide tomorrow. I'm speaking about energy and strengths for final year students, right? Really different sort of session. But a slide is on curiosity, and I want them to just think about it, because I was the same. When I came out of school, I wanted to impress all the patients and tell them all the answers, right? But like that doesn't always work. And I think I'll just go back to Phil again. And you said it earlier, Andrew, Phil Batty, but like, what I really admired about him was that vulnerability play, that he would say, I don't know, but I'll find out.
Yeah.
So like you said, if it's an ultrasound or if it's whatever, it's like, even if you're really good, and even if there's a lot of confidence and expertise and you've done it for years, having the confidence and the assuredness to actually say, I don't really have the answer, but I'm going to find out for you. Or I don't know, but I know someone that does. I'll come back to you. Make sure you come back. But I think we won't all be there, and that might take a lot of time. But I think when you can get to that level of confidence and knowing your how you are in your skin, it's a quality, right? That, like, I'll never forget that when he said that, right? I was like, wow, I'm really impressed. I thought you knew everything. So
yeah, no, it's reassuring for people. Like, again, there's nothing like any of the people who I learned the most of. I always say it about Jo Gibson. She's sick of me, because she had such an important impression on me. But all the people who have had impressions on me showed their vulnerability when I look back on it, and showed that, and it's so empowering when someone does that. It's age old empathic kind of to understand that somebody. So if I'm ever teaching anyone, I always try and make them feel like, you know what I mean. I don't know, or we don't know that. There's no way we can say it, and it's actual fun to explore the fact that it's ambiguous. We have no idea what's going to happen next. We're all predicting these things about how they're going to recover based on some evidence, but we're all guessing. We don't know how that's going to interact. That person's going to go out into the world with a bunch of different things that could go wrong or right or whatever that we have no control over, and some of them they have no control over. Like, it's crazy when you think about it, but we try and make it so reductionist and like, okay, this is going to get better in 6 weeks or 12 weeks. I think sometimes just being appreciative of, look, it's likely to get better, but let's just be clear, it depends. And your language you use with patients and physios may be different, But I think it's something to empower yourself with, and just be like, it's all right to not know that.
And
And, go on, yeah.
and I think knowing you don't have to be really good at everything is
Yeah.
okay. So I mean, only a couple of weeks ago, actually spoke to someone who was my boss, and I actually said, like like speaking to kind of London and a bit after, I wasn't that good at treating patients with my hands, really, was I? And he was like, no. Like in terms of say manual therapy,
Yeah.
mulligans, snags, manips, dry needling, all that jazz, right? It was never my thing.
Yeah.
There were people in the clinic that were so much better at that. And I remember saying like, I wasn't really good at it. I was like, no, I was like, and I actually asked the question. I'm saying this isn't like a ego thing at all. I was like, what do you think I was good at? Really? And he said, you kind of connected with the patients well. And I think about, I asked, it took me a long time to ask that question. And I've thought about it. I had thought about it a lot before asking it, and I've thought about it a lot since. And I think it's absolutely right. And so I would think I went on courses, I read, I subscribed to the BJSM, I went to sports med conferences, but I was never that good at actually a lot of the, say, treatment modalities or rehab. Yeah, some things I was okay at. But what I really, really tried to get good at and think about a lot was trying to understand, trying to talk, trying to listen, trying to be accountable, try to hold them to a standard, like soft skill stuff, right? Hence why that's where I've gone and leaned into, probably because I was shit at the other stuff.
But it leaks into everything, though. Like,
Yeah.
you can't tell me that well, no wonder you're going in, branching into business and being able to open different things. You can't do that if you're just good at rehab or manual therapy, for example. That you'll be very good at that, but the skills that you're talking about and the ability to understand that, I think, for me, my bias is that it is by far, if not 90% of what we do. If we get good at that communication, that reassurance, the connection,
Influence,
yeah, all
all
that,
that stuff.
being able to them, for a patient to walk into the room and go, fucking, I feel like I can crack on now. I'm empowered by it. I don't have to come back for you to fix me. And all that's often been is just building connection through the conversations we've had. Just like you said, I just, again, I'm a believer in it. So that's my bias. And I think if you're listening and you're a therapist, yeah, be good at the other things. But if you're there going, well, I am good at that, like you just said, it's like going, to be
But
honest, if you're good at the other stuff, you're going to do really well.
it's a force multiplier, because if someone's having a bad day, if their knee is swollen and
Yeah,
it's stiff,
right.
like you can change their energy by how you show up and your body language and your words and kind of your energy, and you can make them feel better in 1 minute. But if you're just purely into looking at the knee, you're not going to make the difference. And I think the other way too, you can ground people. So I think it's such a huge thing. So when I'm speaking with anyone or any of the work I'm doing, it's all that stuff. It's all that stuff. Like, it's people skills. Because I think ultimately, no matter what you're doing, Andrew, building a business, selling programs, getting patients to come to you, getting them to understand why to keep coming to you, getting them to it, the difference between adherence and compliance. It's all what you speak about on your pod.
I want to ask you a question. I interviewed a mate of mine, you might know, Colin Fuller. From,
Very well.
yeah. We had a really good conversation. We had a problem with the editing, so hopefully we can be able to do the podcast again. And we got into a great conversation.
Go Brentford.
Go Brentford, right? Yeah. I'm going up to see him in 2 weeks, actually, to watch the United game. You're a United fan, aren't you?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's fucking painful, but we move on.
Funny story. We'll talk about it off air.
Yeah, it's upsetting. But I had a good. He opened my eyes, because obviously again, he's in that world all the time. We talked about. I'm always into. What we talked about, that empathy, connection, vulnerability from athletes, and he opened my eyes to a conversation about athletes and their vulnerability in clinic and what they get from the therapist. And if I can just remember what he was saying, because I was like going, they want to feel vulnerable. He went, but athletes need to feel absolutely robust in their body. And they need that support from the therapist to feel like that. Because I was like, oh no, I want to dissect them. I want to really understand the world. And he went, but you could make their world crumble very easily. And I was like, oh, fuck yeah. You know, it's this fine line between you need to understand their world, but at the same time, they need to be pumped right up, ready to go, ready for any tackle. It doesn't matter. So I don't know what's your, and I think this is a really interesting topic around athlete vulnerability when it comes to injury and how deep you go and where's the line. Have you got any thoughts on that? It's a big
Yeah,
question.
I'm gonna take your two words. I think it depends so much on the athlete. Like,
Yeah, sure.
I think what Cullum said is broad strokes. Although this isn't black and white, I think you'd probably say, yeah, you don't want to acknowledge the fact that they're struggling or that they're partly broken. That ain't gonna help. But I can think of north of 50 examples of the other way, where was chatting to an Aussie footballer last week who's just recently retired and he had a long career, and he wanted absolute honesty, right? So he didn't need to be jacked up and motivated. He didn't need CT Fletcher and ET in the morning. He needed, like, be real, like, what's going on, I need to understand. And that's how he processed and bought in and did well. But then, of course, there's others where you maybe don't want to tell the whole truth, or you're going to hold back a little bit. And I think that's a skill, right? You need to be able to sense it. You need to spot it. You need to identify those athletes, those players where they need a little bit of this. They need to be dialed up a bit, or actually, no, they want to hear it. They want to hear it, and that's going to help. So I think there's a real skill to it. So Fuller's
Yeah.
seen plenty sports surgery clinic in the Prem.
Yeah, and I don't think it
Yeah,
wasn't. I think it was just in the conversation. It was just
yeah,
because I was interested in really kind of. He just brought up. He said at times there is that battle. You know, think about it. It's not the same as somebody who's.
yeah. They're a different animal. They're
Yeah,
different.
it's their career, their life, their finances. Everything's linked to it. There's so many things going on that it's just understanding that thread you pull. When is the right time? It's a timing thing. It's an experience thing. It's everything we've been saying. Trying to work out that patient, building that trust, and when you actually pull that thread, might be all down to maybe today's not the day for that,
Yeah, yeah.
and maybe and how you figure that out. I think is look, it's such a huge question. I'm just really interested, and it's more for. I don't even think we need to have the answer because, like you said, it does depend. But I think just people thinking about this, if they are working with athletes, just when you do that, or when things may not have gone right, it may not have been that you got the diagnosis wrong, or you got this wrong, or that. It might have just been the language you used at that time, and that's the thing you may need to just kind of reflect on more than anything else you did. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I've said it a lot. I often come back to energy. I think sometimes people need it poured into them. Sometimes people pour it out to you. So I think with athletes in particular, it's about really, you know, just understanding if an athlete's high energy or low energy, and kind of what do they need from you, and like if someone's really, repeated concussions and they're struggling with that, knowing what they need from you as a clinician there. Like, what do they need? Maybe they just need to talk, that they're struggling with it. And there's an acknowledgement of what's going on. But, if it's someone else who, I can think of a couple of big basketball players back in the day who had tendons that weren't perfect. And yeah, it could have gone the other way. It could have been a rupture in time. They didn't need to hear that.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
needed
Yeah,
to hear, you're good. Look, you look good on paper. You're looking good functioning. You're moving well. Go out and
yeah.
dominate.
Live
And
in the now. Yeah, yeah,
that's what they needed to hear. And but the signals were there in the right direction, right? So we weren't
yeah.
putting them in the wrong place either. But I think
Yeah, but that's what you're saying there is though, like, am I going to do my ACL, or is this going to go? You're like, well, no one knows that. I remember hearing Eric Mira talking about that. The best way of testing your knee is going out there on the court, and fucking
doing it
jumping
again,
around on it, doing it again. Like, you're not going to know. And so there is a leap of faith, and there has to be a point where it's like, we've done all the testing. This is good at this
you have
moment
to
in
look
time.
at
Without the kind of, you could get hit by a bus kind of stupid comment. It's kind of like, this is it. There's nothing, it's either you go back or you don't go back. But at this moment in time, we can only say you're ready now.
And I'll just add one thing on that too. And I think for
Yeah.
people to hear it, it's really important. I've been there. So I think you've done all this, you've done it all. They've gone through the rehab. There's been good communication. You've ticked all the boxes. They're back to where they were, if not better. They can still re-injure themselves.
Yeah.
They can still do their ACL again, and it breaks not just their heart, but it can happen. Even if you think you've done everything and you've controlled as much, and there's still some uncontrollables you've thrown in there, the nature of the world can be chaotic, and you can't control everything. And 2 minutes in, and it could happen, or it could be a hammy, So I think there's only so much risk mitigation, prevention, lead up to return to however you will return to performance. Stuff can still go sideways, and you can still get biggest risk of injury, previous injury. So I think I can think of a couple of athletes that they came back, and it's like, here we go again. But that's part of it too sometimes, right? And that's where you hear about it, the grit, the tenacity, the ability to keep going. Like that's where that stuff becomes, and that's where the communication becomes really, really important, right?
Brilliant. We'll finish up with maybe something a bit lighter. I'd love to take your the points out. We and the two Andys, I like to call us the three Andrews, always pondering, like, especially around conferences.
Play. Yeah.
Especially, like how conferences are delivered in the traditional way. If you could design a conference yourself, and I know you've done lots of little days and where you've done organized some stuff. I haven't actually been to any of them, but
I'm doing one in October that is specially curated for all the right reasons. So there you go.
So I'm interested in what your take is in and the ideal conference and what's involved in that. Why would it be the ideal conference? What's in that? How have you designed it in a way to maximize, if I'm going there, why would I want to go there? As opposed to the traditional sit there, listen, be spoken at, and absorb. Have you any thoughts on that? Or do you think about the way things go like that?
Not every conference is for everyone, right? And I think depending on where you are in your career, certain things will speak to you more, right? And I mean, I was really deliberate when I started branding the copy of this, not calling it a conference, my one, right? Calling it an event, calling it a gathering. Like, it's not a seminar, it's not a series of workshops, it's not the Arsenal Sports and Exercise Medicine Conference, it's not the Ice Kinetic Football Medicine Conference. It's very different. And I suppose it's not saying it's perfect, not saying it's the best, it's different. So I think for me, I think it, again, it depends what you're looking for. And if you were coming over to my one in October where Andy's speaking at, certain people are going to get tons of value from it, and it might change the trajectory of your career. Other people might kind of go, Jesus, that's not really what I was looking for. I think what I think makes a difference at any event of any kind is space to have conversations, a lightness, not just formal, like too formal. You remove the ability for people to relax and be authentic, right? So I think when you can create a space where there's an energy, where there's an ego check and there's a humility, and you can kind of curate an environment like that. You can kind of think about the space, you can think about the white space in between the sessions, you can think about the people you invite, you can think about the content. Like, those would be big objectives for mine, right? I want people to come and feel comfortable. I want them to feel like they don't have to wear a suit and tie. I want them to feel they can come and have a conversation with others, peers, further along, just starting. So I think also I've really tried to think about what's lacking, what's not out there. So I think if anyone's trying to build a conference, it needs to be something that's part of what they care about, part of what lights them up, part of what they love, part of what they feel there's a want, need, and challenge going on, and speak to that and put it down, and then think about who feeds into that, who kind of buys into that, and then try to create the sort of plan that helps facilitate that. So I think a lot of the time when I go to conferences, corporate or sports med, it's too transactional. It's too much lecture. It's too much one-way orientated. There's not enough dialogue. It's too serious. It's too formal. You can have science, 1,000%. You can have papers, but with a bit of lightness and a bit of humor and a bit more interaction and a bit more space. So I think those are huge things that, trying to take from last year into this one to make it better.
Yeah, cool. We share the same ideas with that. I think you're dead right. I think you can easily get that balance right. And yeah, it's not, look, everything, you set out. I've organized conferences thinking, everyone's going to love it. And you get great feedback, and then you get people, it's just not for them.
Yeah.
But I think we just need to, like you say, move away from the classic formal, I don't know, maybe you don't need to. Maybe some people that suits them down to the ground. But you just go to some where it's like sales, education. Now get in that room and learn shit, and not feel like you've been sold to by 50 people in about a space of an hour, and thinking that you need all this stuff. Like, I just don't see how that's useful for a therapist moving forward. Like, maybe it helps some people, but I just think we need to have a little look at, or people should think about what's happening in those days. Because sometimes I come out of days like that and I felt like I've been in a wash machine. But do you know what I mean? Sorry.
But I'd say too, yeah, and like there's conferences that are really successful that are kind of built like that. But I'd say at any conference you can get something from it. If you think about why you're going and what's the question you're trying to answer, or who's the person you're trying to meet. So I think if you're going to something and you're kind of going, it's going to be a bit dry, it's going to be a bit salesy, you can always get something from it. And I think that could be, there's a speaker you really want to hear, there's people in the room you know that you're interested in, or you're actually going with something that you're wrestling with. But like those sort of conferences, there'll be some people that still want to go to them, and that's cool.
Yeah, sure.
And I think like you've done a bit, you've been around a bit, same as me. So therefore, maybe what I wanted 10 years ago is different to what I want tomorrow. Maybe the same as you, right? So I'm sure the people tomorrow that I'm speaking to are 21, 22. Maybe what I'm running in a couple of weeks mightn't be for them because they mightn't think it could be interesting for them yet. Who knows?
Yeah. No, good points. I like it. And then the last one is bar, family and friends. You can't say that. So my new last question I'm going to ask people. What's your favorite thing in the world?
I love loads of things, right? But I love training. I love training. Every day in the gym, 50 minutes, non-negotiable. Love it. It kind of feeds the animal. Good for the head, good for the body.
Sound. It's a pleasure talking to you, Dave.
Cheers,
really
Andy.
Appreciate it. Best of luck at the end of October, and I'm sure we'll cross paths for sure.
Thanks, man. Enjoyed it.
Nice one.
Thanks for listening to Teacup. If you liked it, tell all your friends. If you didn't, well, maybe you'll like the next one. Go to procareeducation.com or Procare Education on Instagram for more information on courses and the Bamboo Project. And remember, always be sound and not a dickhead.